first one, we're going to go to table pose. Super easy, simple, right? For table pose, we want to make sure that the shoulders are stacked on top of the wrists. Again, bone stacking. Make sure the knees are stacked underneath the hips. The knees are about hips width apart. The hands are placed about shoulder width apart. The fingers are nice and wide. We're pressing the palms down into the earth. And with the table pose, I kind of teach this together with the cat-cows, okay? So, and when we're doing the cat-cows, you might tell them, drop the belly, shine the heart forward, lift the crown. And here is the cow pose. We inhale on the cow. And then we exhale as we round through the spine, look down towards the navel, press into the hands. Empty that breath completely. And then as they begin to inhale, the belly comes down. I always tell them, notice how the sit bones widen, because it really shows you how everything is just so connected. Shine the heart forward, lift the crown. Okay? And the benefits to this is it strengthens low back and abdomen. It's great for low back pain. It stabilizes the wrists, the elbows, the shoulders, the hips and knees. It massages the kidneys, the adrenal glands, and the thyroid. It also warms up the spine as it moves the cerebral spinal fluid. And then the movement of linking the movement or going from, like your cow to your cat, with the breath, this helps to link breath and movement. Because when people start to do yoga, they don't breathe correctly. They don't breathe a lot. And so it really helps to get that motion. It helps to get them to start learning how to breathe with their body. So some contraindications would be people with wrist pain. And again, they could use that foam wedge if they've got wrist pain. That would be a modification. And then, sometimes people say, I really got bad knees, you could try cushioning the knees with a blanket underneath. Putting a blanket underneath the knees. You can place a block between the thighs to build stabilization. Another way to enhance stability is to place the side of the body against a wall. So that if they have a, they have a lot of, what is that? Vertigo, yes. Hey, that's the word I was looking for too. If they have a lot of that and just, being on the hands and knees makes them feel woozy, maybe putting them up against a wall. We talked about the block between the thighs. Another thing, if they do have bad wrists and the foam wedge still isn't cutting it, you could have them come down to the forearms, and you can still do some cat-cow movements to warm up the spine. Okay, we covered modifications. Okay, and the adjustment's super simple. If you want to be my model, I'll just have you get into that table pose. And so I might say, shine the heart forward, lift the crown and inhale. Now as you exhale, press into my hand. Really press into my hand. And then you could come to a regular table pose. And that's about it. I mean, that's as much as I would go. Of course you want to check their alignment, shoulder above the wrist and the hips above the knees. And if you needed to adjust them, you can always lightly move their hips around and stuff like that. But again, that can be a sensitive area, so as verbal as possible. Thank you, Amanda.
That makes sense too. That's the only one I've really seen.
Yeah.
Too, is the breathing into the hand.
Does anybody have any questions about cat-cow or table pose? Then the next one is Uttanasana, standing forward fold. Okay? So that's when we're standing and we're folded over. The benefits to this are forward flexion in the spine and hips. It massages and regenerates the kidneys and adrenal glands. It increases circulation to the brain and the sense organs. It's also really good for the nervous system in helping people decompress and relax. So a lot of times when we do heart openers, back bends, this is energizing. But when we get the spine in flexion and we're closing up and in, this is like, more of that closing in, that room space to relax, to feel safe. Okay. Contraindications, of course, pregnancy, the belly is going to be in the way, and you could have them bend the knees as much as needed and widen the legs out a little bit, maybe give them a block or a chair, something to put their hands on for, stability, so we don't want them toppling forward. So it can be done, but it's something that would need modification. So another contraindication would be recent abdominal surgery. They would need to get a release from their doctor to be able to do yoga again. High blood pressure, which I kind of feel like high blood pressure is a way of just being extra cautious. I feel like people with high blood pressure, personally me, this is just my personal opinion, I feel like they need those kinds of things to help relax and decompress them. But I kind of feel like when we list this, that's a way of covering our...
So what would happen with someone with high blood pressure? What would happen with someone who had high blood pressure and did a forward fold?
I feel like they would relax.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm just curious. What's the reasoning? What's the reasoning for having
You'll have to ask the yoga toolbox.
I have the yoga toolbox. I don't have it with me. But.
Right, but that's the one. That's where they
That's
are the
right,
ones that list
okay.
that this is a contraindication. And
Sure, something with the heart is maybe too much pressure trying to make it go that way, and
Probably make you pass out, I'm guessing. Like if you
Could.
too much blood to the brain, too
high
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
would make them pass out. Now you could always say, okay, if you have really high blood pressure, I want you to do this, but I want you to do it with a chair.
Right.
Don't go all the way down.
Yeah.
So they're not going all the way down, and they have something to feel stable.
Mm-hmm. Also, if you're doing it in like a continuous movement, like I can see like, like if you're in a vinyasa flow and you're like constantly going down and then up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just makes sense. I just was what's it gonna do?
So if they have neck or low back pain, they may require modifications such as a block. And of course, always just slowing things down and moving mindfully is super important. They can a modification for people who, okay, if they can't fold all the way or they can't touch their toes, they can always place their hands on their thighs, their shins, or a block. So these would just be different modifications or levels and layers that you could play with if, you know, they're having a hard time with this pose. Amanda! So we're going to do the adjustment for Uttanasana forward fold. So we'll just let you come into a forward fold however you choose. And so here I would stick one hand on the sacrum. I might rub slightly, gently. We're not pressing. We're just kind of giving tactile information. And then come down to the neck. And then you can massage their neck a little bit. There's a place here in the neck that tells the hamstrings to release. So they might get a little deeper into the pose when they get this little neck massage.
That's weird. That was great.
Yeah,
That was awesome.
thank you so much.
The neck massage tells the what release?
It tells the hamstrings.
Yeah, okay. That was weird.
In like a good way. In a good way, yeah. Does anybody have any questions on Uttanasana or standing forward fold? So downward facing dog, we're all familiar. You know, just to talk about how to come into the pose, you know, a lot of times we start from a tabletop. This is one good way. I tell people tuck the toes, keep the knees bent, send the hips up as high as you can get the hips first, right? So once we get the maximum there, then we can start to press down through the feet and lengthen through the legs. Now, some people's heels may never ever touch, right? And that can be compression, right? We talked about compression versus tension. Okay, so we've got the lower half, but now what about the upper half? So I always tell people peace fingers and thumbs. Index finger, middle finger, and thumb, and the inner part of the hand. If we press and weight bear in these inner parts of the hand, you may even be able to lift your pinkies. This is going to save you from wearing out the wrist or causing injury to the wrist, okay? So it's really important that we talk to people about how they weight bear in their hands. Now, another controversy is the shoulders. Now, again, compression versus tension, not everybody's going to look the same. So as long as the hands are about shoulder width, right? Now, some people's elbows might be like this, right? Again, that could be compression. But of course, you know, ideally, we don't want the elbows bent, so, you know, but if they're like, no, seriously, that's all I can get, then respect them, you know, like, and the creases of the elbows might be different. Now, for most people, I'd say are gonna face forward or inward, okay? But again, you don't want to get too picky about all those little minute anatomy pieces because everybody's body is so different. The spine, that's the most important part. With downward facing dog, you want to see a nice angle. You don't want to see a hump, you know, whether they need to walk the hands in maybe a little bit, you know, you want that spine to be nice and long and straight. And you want their head to be in alignment with that line, the angle, okay? Now the benefits, it integrates balance between upper and lower body. It strengthens and stretches the legs and shoulders. So it's going to build upper body strength. It's going to stretch the hamstrings and calves. It calms the nervous system. And it's really good for the cervical spine too, because you're getting some range of motion, you're getting elongation, I guess, of the cervical spine. Like you're creating space there where right now we have gravity, but then once you put us in this pose, now my cervical spine is getting anti-gravity here. It's getting the opposite, and it's able to put some space there in the vertebrae and the discs, and so relieving tension that might be built up in the cervical spine. So contraindications, those with wrist or shoulder pain should use modifications. The wrist, those foam wedges, you can do that. Shoulder, so if they're having shoulder issues and they're like shoulder impingement or shoulder injury and you don't want them weight bearing, you know, you might bring in a chair. Have you guys seen downward dog with a chair? Okay, let me bring one in. It's helpful. It's a nice.
I can tell you guys is not somebody right at mine.
My note-taking style is to write down everything they say. It's not a good note-taking style.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I'm doing. It's like, I'm trying to get subtitles that say benefits, condom.
I can always repeat anything that.
So we're just talking about different note-taking styles.
Oh, okay. So here's downward dog with the chair. You can do the side. You can do the front.
So that's for shoulders.
Yeah. So this way, at least they're getting the pose and the benefits of the pose without the weight bearing of the upper body.
Right.
Now, even some injuries, this might be too much,
Yeah.
right? So then the next step would be to take it to a wall.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can still see me. Let's do it this way. And then they can kind of walk in or out and kind of listen to their body of how much range of motion they want to utilize. So you can do the wall, the chair, the foam wedges for wrist issues. Yep, that's everything. Okay. So now the adjustment. Okay, now first you want to kind of look, you might, round the shoulders if that feels, see she has a nice spine here. She could almost step back a little bit and widen her, see how that looks. That looks better with the spine.
That looks better.
Yep. Okay. So we've looked at the arms, pressing on the sacrum, gently touch head to relax. Now I don't really like to touch people's heads, so I might just give them a little pressure here. I'm not gonna touch someone's head. Let's see. Press into the fascia in upper or lower back. You can reach back and pull back, I guess, is one way. Grabbing hips and pulling back gets them to go a little deeper into it without causing any injury. And then there's one where it says C-shape, or touch the ribs, touch the ribs and tell them pull in ribs, squeeze in hips. But like, I don't think it's a good idea to go reaching for ribs because we got boobs and things, right?
Yeah.
So, you might just say the words, pull in ribs, squeeze in hips. Just that verbal cue might be just enough. Thank you so much, Amanda. Does anybody have any questions about downward facing dog?